At a long-shot impeachment hearing in the Colorado House, Republicans are walking back their claims that targeting the state's top election official will boost their popularity with voters, claims they first made here on Next.
And that can also hopefully help us in next election cycle.
Add Governor Jared Polis to the list of unhappy Xcel customers. He's calling for an investigation into this weekend's power outages. Keeping Denver's parks in bloom takes a lot of green. A nonprofit is launching a volunteer gardening effort after citywide budget cuts. And despite progress at the state capitol, researchers say LGBTQ patients in Colorado are still falling victim to discrimination at the doctor's office. All that and so much more tonight on Next. Colorado lawmakers are doing their best impression of U.S. Congress today, holding a hearing with a predetermined outcome that results in sound bites that both Democrats and Republicans will be able to use in future campaigns. House Republicans are trying to impeach Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold. House Democrats agreed to give it a hearing that will end with Griswold not being impeached. Politics Time, Marshall Zellender joins us from the state capitol now, where the hearing is still going on. Marshall, it will fail, but that's not really the point here.
I will tell you right now that the vote will be 8-3. 8 Democrats on the committee against impeachment, 3 Republicans on the committee for it. So no, impeachment is not the point. It's this. It's us doing a story. It's Republicans being able to prove to their voters they stood up to power on an issue they find controversial. And it's Democrats being able to say they gave it a hearing, and also they're giving the Secretary of State another platform to say some of the same things that Republicans are trying to impeach her over.
What you mean, but I do think that if you are accusing me of being biased, we should talk about the election conspiracies that have continuously come out of House Republicans.
So that's how it's going in the impeachment attempt of Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold. Republican House Minority Leader Rose Puglisi and Republican State Representative Ryan Armagost want to impeach Griswold, accusing her of malfeasance in the effort to keep former President Trump off the primary ballot.
For using her official position to engage in viewpoint discrimination and election interference by trying to prevent a candidate she does not like from making it onto the Colorado ballot.
Here's what really happened. 6 Colorado voters and a liberal Washington, D.C. group sued Griswold to keep Trump off the ballot, a lawsuit that went to the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled he was eligible. Griswold, as Secretary of State, printed Trump's name on the ballot, and all votes for Trump were counted. What's really at issue is that she went on TV, radio, and social media to say things like this about Trump.
House Republicans are trying to impeach me for saying the undeniable truth. And I want to clearly say to the Republicans on this committee, Trump is an oath-breaking insurrectionist.
This hearing allowed Colorado lawmakers to act like the U.S. Congress. It's rare for a lawmaker to interrupt a witness testifying, normally about why a bill should pass or fail, but this was not a normal hearing.
So the real impeachable offense is that she didn't defy any court order and that her rhetoric and statements were critical of Donald Trump. Isn't that correct?
No, and I'll finish my comment.
Nothing further.
Then there was the part of the hearing where Democratic State Representative Jennifer Bacon
and Kyle Clark asked you what
cited this interview from Next between Kyle and Armagost.
And that can also hopefully help us in next election cycle.
Well, you didn't just say you're impeaching her because it'll help you in the next election cycle.
No, I think this will get more people to come to vote so that we can get more people voting for what they think is right.
And you said during the interview that the purpose of this resolution is to hopefully help us in the next election cycle, and quote, this will get more people voting, and quote, have Republicans win elections this fall. Is that correct?
That is incorrect. That is out of context.
But you did say those words.
The words that you took out of context, I did say yes.
Okay, but you said.
There is one question that the Secretary did not answer, and it came from State Representative Jennifer Bacon. She asked Griswold that, minus a lawsuit, would Griswold have tried to keep Trump off the primary ballot on her own? She said something to the effect of, I would do whatever a court order told me to do. So in the hallway, I asked Griswold, hey, you didn't answer the question. Is it yes or no? She told me she didn't really have an answer because she and other secretaries of state expected a lawsuit in some state. It just happened to be Colorado. They expected a lawsuit on this, so she kind of avoids the answer. She did say, however, Mark, this was interesting, that they considered it a few years ago when former State Representative Ron Hanks was running for U.S. Senate. He was outside the Capitol on January 6th, and she said they couldn't prove that he went inside, so it became a non-issue to them about whether or not they should unilaterally try to remove him and disqualify him from the ballot a few years ago.
Marshall, the hottest club in Denver on a Tuesday night might just be the state capitol. Things are popping off there. They're getting spicy. Are people still there at 6 p.m.?
Well, outside the person who walked by, not really. Even the Secretary of State is gone, since we know it's going to be 8-3 in favor of not impeaching her. And the committee room is fairly empty compared to how it looked when the hearing started. So pretty much Mike Grady, photojournalist, and I are hanging out at the Capitol with very few people other than that.
Yeah, why stay if you already know what the outcome's going to be? Marshall, thank you. If you had your power cut by Xcel this weekend and thought, maybe that could have been handled a little bit better, you're not alone. The governor has some thoughts for Xcel, too. Governor Jared Polis is directing the state regulators now, who he appoints, to work out all those kinks in the system. In a letter to the CEO of Xcel's Colorado operations this afternoon, Polis said he was disappointed by the utility's process of proactively cutting power to thousands of Xcel customers. Xcel says it made that decision amid some of the highest winds and front-range fire danger that we've seen in the foothills since the Marshall Fire. But the governor is pointing to complaints from customers who were notified just hours before the outages that then went on to go for days. This was the first time that Xcel proactively shut off power in Colorado, but it likely will not be the last. Now, Polis is directing the state's Public Utilities Commission to investigate Xcel's process, including how the company decides to shut off power and how they communicate that with customers. It's still up to the PUC to carry out that investigation, and they already told us yesterday they're seeking immediate feedback from all those Xcel customers who saw their power cut this weekend. Coming up with new regulations, though, could still take many more months. City councilors in North Glen have unanimously voted to require registered sex offenders to be housed farther away from schools. It's a last-ditch effort to stop a proposed mental health facility from coming to town. But spoiler, it may not actually matter at all. North Glen officials say they've been left in the dark about the state's plans to transform 2 former senior living community buildings into transitional housing and living homes for patients who have been discharged from higher-level mental health hospitals. Patients are screened, but people with criminal histories and prior sex offenses, they could still be eligible for these homes based on referrals from medical providers. The State Department of Human Services says a maximum of 2 registered sex offenders would be allowed in one home at one time. But that didn't stop community members from packing a town hall in opposition last week, voicing concerns that the facilities are too close to local elementary schools. Last night, North Glen City Council passed an emergency ordinance to prohibit sex offenders from living within 1,000 feet of a school. So that's up from 750 feet that North Glen previously required. But councilors said the state doesn't have to abide by those rules and claimed that state officials haven't been open to local feedback so far.
The state has not been transparent with us. Therein lies that lack of communication piece. We have been working diligently to have a partnership with the state, and in this case, that just has not happened. We want the state to bring us to the table for you.
We reached out to the Colorado Department of Human Services, the agency that's in charge of those facilities, to see if they'll voluntarily follow that local ordinance. Spokesperson told us the facilities are governed by state law and that they, quote, don't have immediate plans to admit any sex offenders to that specific facility. Well, we have asked a lot of questions on this show about how much money the mayor's homelessness initiative here in Denver is costing taxpayers. Now the Denver Auditor's Office will be asking some of those same questions. We learned today the auditor is looking into the finances related to the city's homeless shelters. The audit has already started and is expected to wrap up in July or August. While they don't know exactly what they'll find, obviously, the auditor's office confirms that how much it's costing to operate the shelters in Denver will be a part of the scope of that audit. Mayor Mike Johnston's office has released very little information about how much it's costing to move more than 1,400 people off the streets and into shelter. More than $110 million has already been approved by City Council for projects related to the effort, far more than what was budgeted. Meanwhile, when it comes to spending money in Denver, flowers were the first thing to go when budget cuts were announced earlier this year. Flower beds in parks across Denver won't be planted this year as the city tries to save money to pay for migrant services. Now volunteers are stepping up to keep Civic Center Park green this summer. The Civic Center Park Conservancy nonprofit is launching a fundraising effort to plant and maintain flowers at the park this summer. They're trying to raise more than $25,000 for the effort and about 2 to 3 days of volunteer work to get it all done. The group's executive director says it's actually really a public health benefit.
We know that parks are public health. And flowers are a part of that, and beauty is a part of that. So not only does it make the experience better here, but it's really an indication that this is a welcoming and accessible place.
Flower planting program will be completely volunteer driven. Won't start until next month, assuming that they get all of that money. We'll talk about bad timing. Parks and Wildlife meeting with ranchers turned sour after the state's new wolves that we reintroduced killed 2 calves in less than 10 days. And Colorado's LGBTQ community says all too often the odds are stacked against them at the doctor's office. A researcher is giving them a voice. Next. Probably not the reception Parks and Wildlife officials were hoping for today in Grand County. Community meeting to discuss living with the state's newly reintroduced wolves turned real sour real quick after Colorado Parks and Wildlife confirmed reports that wolves have killed 2 calves in northern Colorado this month. We're 9 days into April. CPW staff told ranchers today that different wolves were involved in those killings in Jackson and Grand counties for the past 10 days. Critics have argued that CPW and state lawmakers haven't given ranchers the tools that they need to manage the wolves effectively. And there aren't clear rules about when ranchers or if ranchers can kill a wolf that is threatening their livestock. Today, CPW argued they're still trying to catch up with the tight reintroduction timeline that voters, all of us, approved in 2020.
Shouldn't this process have been started beforehand? The answer, the blanket answer to that is yes. The kicker with that whole thing is that we're the agency that's being charged with creating all these rules and this process, but we're not the ones that started this whole mechanism at the beginning of it.
Makes a good point. Ranchers are currently encouraged to use non-lethal methods to deter wolves, with some possible exceptions for wolves that are caught in the act of attacking livestock. At least one rancher today has asked for permission to use a thermal scope to spot and kill wolves attacking livestock overnight. Colorado Parks and Wildlife is still considering that request. Well, we have made it to the point where it just feels beautiful outside. Feels like spring. Time to get outside and enjoy Colorado weather. Kathy's here with the weather.
Thanks, Mark. What a beautiful day. Sunshine and 63 in downtown Denver. Hard to believe we're in between 2 storm systems, one to the south bringing a little moisture up into the southern mountains, and another one to the north that may bring in a few mountain snow showers tomorrow. For Denver, 20% chance of a late day rain shower, but I still think we're going to see 80 degrees by the weekend. Radar, not a lot to show you. A few snow showers from Pueblo down to Trinidad, the southern foothills and mountains. In Denver, there'll be a few passing clouds tonight, a few more tomorrow, and then a couple of late day rain showers. Some of that moisture may not even make it to the ground. A mild night tonight, great night to be out. Low 60s now, will drop into the 50s after the dinner hour. Extended forecast shows a 20% chance of a late day rain shower tomorrow. Sunshine in mid 60s on Thursday. Close to 80 for Friday and Saturday. I think we will get there on Sunday. Beautiful weather for Monday and Tuesday with some changes coming in the middle part of next week.
The way we frame our questions, the way we ask these questions can shut people down.
New data suggests the LGBTQ community is struggling to get help when they might be at their most vulnerable. A Colorado researcher wants to empower them at the doctor's office. Next. Health disparities within the LGBTQ community are becoming more clear as more people do research. Despite Colorado being considered by many as an inclusive state, experts say that's not always the case. Jaleesa Irizarry explains.
On a college campus with thousands of people, there's often only one place some may feel safe.
This is my favorite place on campus because I feel seen. I just realize the impact these places have can go a really long way.
Carrie Kandrian is an associate professor at CU Anschutz. She knows how detrimental it is for LGBTQ folks to not feel seen, especially in healthcare. According to a study released by the Kaiser Family Foundation this month, 1 in every 3 LGBT adults report experiencing unfair or disrespectful treatment by a healthcare provider. 24% of those LGBT individuals say those negative experiences had an effect on their health.
The way we frame our questions, the way we ask these questions can shut people down. It's awful.
Kandrian isn't surprised by these numbers. She spent much of her career pushing for more research like this.
Overdue.
It took a long time for anyone to listen.
We don't have data, great data on the LGBTQ community, including hospice. And so part of this grant is to help people understand how critical knowing this information, knowing who someone is, who they love, what they want, what they don't want, to radically change the way LGBT people are cared for.
Kandrian is in the middle of a 5-year grant to develop a way to improve care for LGBT older adults in hospice. She says her research shows Colorado is not immune to this issue. These numbers, she believes, it's time to change that.
I hope that these reports don't allow people to continue admiring the problem and really ask them to do better.
The healthcare disparity is even greater for LGBT people of color. 24% of Black LGBT adults and 15% of Hispanic LGBT adults say they were treated unfairly by a healthcare provider. That's compared to 4% of white LGBT adults.
So, where do we go from here? We do this research. Now what happens next?
Yeah, Kandrian is still kind of in the midst of this 5-year grant, right? But what she hopes to accomplish with it is create a training program for some healthcare providers to make sure that they know how to ask the right questions, right? Make sure that there are multiple answers to this question, not just fit for a specific kind of person. That's one thing she wants to do. And she wants to collect new healthcare forms, right, to create a better focus on gender identity so that these individuals will get the care that they need.
Important stuff. Jaleesa, thank you. Tonight's next question comes from an eagle-eyed viewer named Paul, who wants to know why the Colorado flag was on display at the New York Stock Exchange for Monday's closing bell. Good eye, Paul. Governor Jared Polis ran the stock exchange's closing bell last night. We're told that the reason was to celebrate Colorado's thriving business community. But Polis didn't actually go to New York. The bell traveled to him. He ran it from the governor's mansion right here in Denver. The trading floor in New York, though, was decked out with the Colorado state flag and the state seal, just like you see right there on your screen. There you go. Colorado making a big impact in New York. Marissa, thank you. We're back with your feedback next. It is a sign to slow down, like really slow down, all the way down. How about 0 miles an hour? If you're driving through Happy Canyon, you better plan on being late. Jana Zellender, you may recognize that last name, sent this photo to us yesterday. Right near Thomas Jefferson High School, it's a speed limit sign saying the limit is 0. At that point, honestly, why not just put a stop sign up? That's my question. If you see a sign that makes you do a double take, email them to next@9news.com or get our attention with the hashtag #HeyNext. Back with your feedback now. A lot of feedback about the flowers that are not being planted all throughout Denver. Kara says, to some, flowers might seem frivolous, but the beauty they provide makes people happy. I have a question about these flowers as well. We talked about Civic Center Park and the nonprofit that's already helping there plant flowers. I wonder about other parks, like the small neighborhood parks or Cheeseman Park or Wash Park or other parks that don't have nonprofits. I bet that other nonprofits, neighborhood groups will step up and plant their own flowers. We'll see you next time.